Hi guys, James at Rampant Lion Reviews again for you today with another beer review. For this one, we are going to stick to Scotland and we're going to return to a brewery that's featured on the channel a couple of times before. I've had some really nice beers from these guys over the years, a few different styles, but I would say most of the beers that I've tried from this brewery have been some sort of IPA, and most of them have been really kind of West Coasty leaning IPAs at that as well. But the one that we're going to have a look at today is a new addition to a series that I have touched upon on the channel before. The last one in that series was very nice, so I do have quite high hopes for this one. And there's a few things that kind of piqued my curiosity about this beer, which I'll explain in just a minute. But hopefully this is another good beer. Hopefully it makes for an interesting review, and I hope that you guys enjoy this one as well. So for this review, we are going to head to the Black Isle, just to the north of Inverness in the Scottish Highlands. We're going to go to the north end of the Black Isle to a little place called Cromarty, and that of course means that we're going to have a look at another beer from Cromarty Brewing Company. So this particular beer comes from their hop showcase, which is essentially a series of single hopped IPAs. This one is the Idaho 7. It comes in at 6% ABV, and if this one is similar to the Azaka, which was the last one in the series that we had, it will be a sort of West Coasty leaning IPA actually. But yeah, looking forward to this. Idaho 7 is a hop that I do quite enjoy. I have had this in single hopped IPAs before, namely the 100 series from OO Brewing over in Gothenburg in Sweden, but that was a New England IPA, and as I've explained in other reviews, hops can behave really quite differently depending on what malt base they're mixed with, so I'm curious to see how this one turns out in a more kind of West Coasty setting, if you like. So yeah, let's crack on with this one then and see how we go. Always nice to return to Cromarty Brewing when I'm back home in the motherland of Scotland. If you do want to try some beers from these guys, I would recommend the Black Hop Down, the Rogue Wave, and the Happy Chappy is a very good one as well if you can get a hold of it. So yeah, have a go at those and see what you think. There's a few of their other beers that I do need to get reviews done for as well, but these guys are very solid when it comes to the West Coasty IPAs and paleos and things like that in my experience. But yeah, let's go for it then. So, as always with my reviews, I'll tell you a little bit about the brewery before we taste the beer. If you want to get straight to the tasting, just fast forward. All the usual links are in the video description below. That's the brewery website, the link to my other reviews that I've done from Cromarty Brewing Company before, and we will no doubt add more to that list at some point in the near future. But there's all the usual social media down there. If you want to see more reviews, do please consider subscribing to the channel. The whole channel, of course, has a geography-based tagging system, so you can go into the homepage and search for beer based on country, city, state, county, province, prefecture, whatever it is you happen to be interested in. Do check out the playlist of beers from different countries. There is one there for all the Scottish beers I've reviewed for you. That's being added to very regularly at the moment because I am at home in the motherland of Scotland. And as always, please do get in touch and let me know some of the other beers and breweries that you guys would like to see me review. It's always great to hear from you guys that are watching the videos, and the support that you show the channel is hugely appreciated. So anyway, on to my brewery notes then to tell you a little bit about Cromarty Brewing Company then. So as I've mentioned to you already, Cromarty Brewing Company are based on the Black Isle, which is about 20 miles to the north of Inverness in the Scottish Highlands, and historically this region was well known as a malt producing region, and much of it was actually exported abroad or used in brewing or whisky distilling locally. But the original Cromarty brewery was established by George and Alexander Rossback in the year 1790, and it's located next to a burn on the eastern extremity of Cromarty village at the corner of Miller Road and Burnside Place. And it was actually quite a large brewery considering the times, and it's thought that the port at Cromarty had been used to export beer in addition to the cereals and grains that the Black Isle was renowned for. But this particular brewery hit financial difficulties in the 1820s, and this was when several whisky distilleries began opening up on the Black Isle, and the brewery eventually ceased operations at some point in the 1850s. And this is actually something that's quite noteworthy in Scotland, is that there was actually encouragement for estates to start their own whisky distilleries. So you will find that the roots of many whisky distilleries in Scotland these days go back to some kind of estate. But this new version, if you like, or the reincarnation as we can call it, of Cromarty Brewing Company, is a family-run business that consists of Craig, Chap and Jenny Middleton. So Craig is a graduate of the brewing programme at Heriot-Watt University in Edinburgh, which has produced many well-known brewers these days in the craft beer world. But while studying at Heriot-Watt, Craig had been well known to produce beer in his student halls, and after he completed his degree he worked for periods of time at Odell's Brewery over in Colorado, and also for the Cairngorm Brewery in Aviemore, a bit to the south of Inverness. But while working in these breweries, he decided that he wanted to put his own beer on the market and make his own recipes and things like this. So he started applying for grants and bank loans to finance the startup of the brewery. But Craig's dad, Chappie, is also the brewery engineer. He's quite involved in the maintenance of the brewing equipment, and his mum, Jenny, largely deals with the admin side of the brewery. But work on the brewery building itself commenced in spring of 2011, and this hectic year culminated with the production of the first casks on the 19th of December 2011, and they've gone from strength to strength since. But you can find the brewery on Cannon Street in Davidston, just to the south of Cromarty Village. But over the last few years, they've been continuing to release new beers and build up the fermentation capacity of the brewery, and as of October 2021, when I'm filming this review for you, these guys have produced around 90 different kinds of beer according to Untappd. They do have quite a solid core range. Like I said, Rogue Wave and Happy Chappy are probably the two longest serving beers, I would think, but there's ones like Cowabunga, which I still need to review actually. Ghost Ship is another one that's been on the go for quite a while as well. There are beers that have been there for a really good length of time actually. Their anniversary beers are supposed to be quite good, so I will need to see if I can get a hold of some of those at some point actually. But yeah, these guys have done some really nice beers in the past, and when Happy Chappy was first released, that was a really, really well thought of IPA in Scotland at the time, and it's still a little bit of a classic actually, so that's where I would say that you should start when it comes to Cromarty Brewing Company. Very solid brewery when it comes to these West Coasty type IPAs actually. But yeah, that's all I can really tell you about Cromarty Brewing Company for the moment. If you want to learn more about these guys, you can check out the brewery website, you can follow them on Facebook and Instagram to keep up to date with all the latest goings on, and you can check out the Rate Beer, Untappd and Beer Advocate pages to learn a little bit more about all the different beers that these guys have done. So yeah, let's get on and actually have a little look at this beer itself then. So as you can see, the artwork on this one is pretty similar to what we've seen from Cromarty Brewing Company in the last couple of reviews. They have undergone a rebrand within the last couple of years. If you look at my very early Cromarty Brewing reviews, you would notice that this is quite a bit different. The original Cromarty Brewing thing was very much like this. It was pretty much just this wave with Cromarty written underneath it, if I remember rightly. But you can see it is really nice. The artwork with all the hop flowers and stuff is really nicely done as well. This beer is a 440ml can, and as we said, it is a single hopped IPA, West Coast IPA. I would, if it's anything like the Azaka one that we had a wee while ago. And yeah, it should be pretty good actually. I think I paid about £4 or something like that for this can, so that would be maybe a little bit less, but I think it was about £4, so that's maybe going to be about €4.50, so that's 45 Swedish kroner, and somewhere in the region of like $5.50 American for those of you watching over there. So yeah, not too bad actually, about the same price as I would pay in Sweden, so not bad for a 6% kind of West Coasty leaning IPA. I did also take a few notes on Idaho 7 for you, since it is a single hopped IPA, but Idaho 7 apparently was developed by the Jackson Hop Farm in Idaho, hence the name. But it was released in 2015, so it's only been around for a few years. It usually gives you between 13 to 15% alpha acid. Remember, the alpha acids are the ones that determine how bitter a hop is going to be. The beta acids are the ones that determine how long that bitterness will last in the beer. But this one is known for its apricot-y flavours, its papaya character, and it's also supposed to give you quite a little bit of pine resin as well, which is something that I've never really noticed about Idaho 7. And a lot of my reviews that you will have seen up until now, I've always talked about the very kind of soft tropical fruit character that Idaho 7 tends to add into a beer. So I'm curious to see how that varies when it's put into the more West Coast IPA setting, if you like, because, you know, depending on what you have in your malt base, hops can behave differently. But yeah, 6% sort of West Coasty leaning IPA, this one, or at least I suspect it's going to be a West Coasty IPA. Let's get it out and we'll get on with the tasting. Just a plain silver top on the can, incidentally, as well. But let's do this. So let's get this guy out and into the glass then. There we go. A little bit of smoke on the opening, of course. But yeah, this one actually does look a little bit more New England-y, come to think of it. That's kind of interesting. Let me just have a little look at the ingredients on this one. Does it say? It says barley, oats, hops, yeast and water. So that's kind of interesting. No wheat mentioned though. But yeah, I think we've got enough of it out of the can and into the glass just now to do the appearance and aroma. So we'll look at that. But this does look a little bit more like a New England-y one compared to what I remember from the Azaka actually. But yeah, before the head disappears on this one, you can see the beer's poured with about a 1/3 finger of a frothy, I would say kind of creamy ivory coloured head. That is fading away just to be a very thin foamy layer, so I'll just give you a little quick look at that. So let the camera focus on the bubbles there, if it does it. Doesn't want to do it apparently, but there you go, you can see anyway. But yeah, the colour of this one is pretty nice actually. If we shine the light through this, it does have a little bit of that more kind of ambery leaning haze to it. So I would describe this one as being akin to a sort of mixed tropical fruit juice, with these more kind of New Englandy hazy type IPAs. Always like to talk about what kind of fruit juice they look like, because that's just what their appearance reminds me of. But yeah, 1 or 2 big bubbles sticking towards the side of the glass, a few little ones going up towards the bottom of the head there. But overall, it looks pretty nice, to be honest with you. But like I said, the surprise for me is that this one looks a bit more like a New England hazy type IPA rather than the naturally hazy West Coasty IPA that we had last time. But yeah, remember, the colour of your beer depends on 1, the type of malts that you use, 2, the length of your wort boil is also going to play a role. The longer you boil the wort, the more the sugars caramelise, and thus you get a darker colour of beer. Any as they say, any barrel agent that you do and any adjuncts that you put in are also going to affect the colour of your beer, but you don't really have to care about that so much when it comes to IPAs and pale ales and stuff like that. But yeah, the level of haze in this beer will likely be due to the yeast and also the oats in this case. Wheat will normally play a role in that too, but there's no wheat in this beer as far as the label tells us. It just says barley malt and oats. So yeah, as I say, a little bit surprised that this one is a bit more New Englandy in appearance, but when you consider what a modern IPA is, you know, it's not such a big surprise. But yeah, looks the part of a modern IPA, this one, so I don't think we really need to say any more about the appearance. Let's have a closer look at the aroma and just see how we get on with this beer then. Very curious about this. Ooh, that does actually smell pretty nice. So yeah, straight away with this beer, you can smell the oaty side of it. I'm going to say that straight away. You've got a lot, the malty character comes out of this one quite a bit. And we'll talk about the oats a little bit later on, because I think this beer, I think this one has been canned maybe about a month and a half ago, something like that. So we'll keep that in mind with this one. You can smell that in the oats a little bit, because in a New England sort of IPA, the oats sort of, they just give you this slightly more kind of porridgey note, I find, when the beer starts to get to be about, 6 weeks old, something like that. The oats just kind of almost cream and porridge up a little bit, if you can say that, and you can smell a little bit of that going on in this beer. But overall, it strikes me as being quite an oaty, smooth, and just juicy, fruity New England IPA, this one. It really is leaning more towards that New Englandy side of the spectrum rather than the West Coasty side of the IPA spectrum. So I do apologise for telling you lies earlier on in the video, and it's kind of unusual actually to get a hazy IPA from these guys, as far as I know, because most of the IPAs, if not all of them, that I've had from Cromarty before have been West Coasty leaning. So yeah, that's interesting. But yeah, the fruity side of this beer is nice and soft and juicy. The green component is actually quite relaxed as well. But let's just break the aroma down for you a little bit more and describe it a wee bit more in depth. So underneath the malt base, you can, well, as part of the backbone of the malt base, we should say, you do get a little bit of a kind of fresh, white bready bread crust in there. You can absolutely smell that out of this beer. There's a lovely big white bready character to this one, which I do really enjoy. You can smell that in this, and it does have a lovely bit of just soft bready backbone there. There must be a good few different types of barley malt in this one. It's a bit hard to pick out because the oats are quite prominent, but yeah, a little bit of kind of bread crusty backbone there, smooth white bready character, and I don't think there's too much else in the below the oats in this. So on top of that, you get the nice smooth creamy oats. Actually, you can smell a little bit of the dryness from the oats as well, and there is a wee bit of that slightly porridgey kind of thing that I was talking about from this one, and I think that is just due to the age of the beer itself. But there is a fair degree of sweetness coming out of this one, and I'm not surprised about that when it comes to Cromarty, because they were always quite good at giving you a nice, quite sweet malt base. They always used to like, I'm sure Craig always used to like Maris Otter and these kind of malts. So with this one, I am getting a little bit of that kind of Werther's Original butter candy, butterscotchy type thing. out of this one. There is a little bit of that in there. I certainly get a wee bit of McVitie's Digestive, and I'm not sure, but I could see there, I could, you know, argue that there's a wee bit of a sweet caramel there in the malt base as well. But the malty backbone of this beer is pretty solid on the nose, actually. I really like that about this one. But Cromarty were always pretty good at giving you a nice malty backbone to the beers, and I've always said this, for me, I've always had a little bit of a kind of sweet tooth in that way. I call it the Scottish sweet tooth. I think a lot of people in Scotland do like a kind of malty leaning beer because of the old Scotch ales, of course. But yeah, the malty backbone of this one is really nice, but it comes across as quite an oaty, kind of creamy New England IPA. And as I've explained to you before, I think there's 6 different directions for these beers. They can be sort of farmhousey, and the kind of farmhousey and yeasty, rye leaning and grainy, wheaty, bitey, oaty, creamy, barley malt leaning and bready, or they can be a little bit sweeter and kind of brown sugary leaning. But this one's oaty for sure, but with a bit of sweetness to it as well. But on the hoppy side of things then, which should be our focus with a single hop IPA, the green component's quite interesting with this one. You do get a little bit of earthiness out of the beer for sure, but it's got quite a nice deep floral aromaticity to it. Now remember, the modern IPA tends to rely on late addition and dry hopping, which don't give you, well, dry hopping doesn't give you any bitterness. Late addition hopping gives you only a little bit of bitterness. Early addition hopping is the one that gives you all the bitterness, basically. But yeah, West Coast IPAs have that in addition to late and dry hopping, whereas New England IPAs tend to only use late and dry hopping. So yeah, you can get a little bit of a deep floral note out of this one. I don't know if I'd go quite as far as pine resin, but it certainly has got a little bit of depth to it. And other than that, you do get a nice kind of wet, freshly cut grass out of this beer. So that's kind of interesting as well. So green component isn't too much of a surprise in this one. I was curious to see the pine character of this, but that is something you'd probably detect a little bit more in a West Coasty IPA where there is the early addition hopping as well. But yeah, let's look at the fruity side of it. So the fruity side of this one is really pretty nice, actually. So lovely for me, a lovely big kind of, I do get a bit of mango out of it, but you can smell that big juicy apricot note out of this one, and it's quite an oily apricot, I would say. I do certainly get a little bit of that, the papaya that you will always find. You often get these big juicy oily fruity characters from Idaho 7, so I certainly do get a wee bit of papaya. Certainly a nice wee bit of papaya. And there's also that, there's also that kind of, I get a little bit of an oily orange out of this one as well, which I've never really noticed about Azaka 2. Which I've never noticed about Idaho 7. Brain's not working, but it smells actually like the orange you get from Azaka. That's why it came to mind. It's got that little bit of a kind of mandarin-y sharpness to it, which is interesting. But yeah, definitely get the papaya. I get a wee bit of pineapple out of this one as well, but apricots, a little bit of an oily mango. But yeah, the fruity notes out of this are nice and big and oily, actually. So yeah, this is really interesting for me. I do like how this beer goes about its business in that sense. So as I always say, take a little bit of time to ponder over the aroma of the beer before you get stuck into it, especially when you're looking at a single hop IPA like this, because it's always a good educational experience, can we say. But yeah, I think it's about time that we tried this one. So this is the Idaho 7, a 6% New England Hazy IPA by the looks of it, from the Hop Showcase series at Cromarty Brewing Company just outside of Cromarty on the Black Isle here in Scotland. Let's get stuck into this one. Slàinte, skål, cheers. Yeah, that's pretty nice, actually. Quite a nice, just easy drinking IPA rather than anything else. Yeah, and it's definitely got more of that New Englandy character compared to the other one. So I don't know if that was the intention with this beer, actually, but yeah, this is really more kind of hazy and New Englandy than the other one. That is for sure, actually. But obviously, I think maybe what he's doing is changing the malt base to suit the hop. I mean, I always think orangey flavours and the big oily orange character you get with them, those can work a little bit better in West Coast IPAs. So I can see why the Azaka one would be a little bit more West Coasty, whereas yeah, if you've got the soft kind of tropical flavours like this, that probably would be expressed better in a New England IPA. So probably what's going on with these is rather than keeping the same malt base and just changing the hops, they are, you know, keeping the same ABV, the same IBU and stuff like this, and then mucking around with the malt base to match the hops. That's probably what they're doing here with this one. But it's a pretty solid beer, this actually. It's a nice, just easy drinker. So let's try and break down the flavour of this for you then and describe it a wee bit more in depth. Let's go for it. So, backbone of the beer is kind of what you'd expect. There's a little bit of bread crust across the middle and the back third of your palate, absolutely. On top of that, you get a nice, very smooth and quite dense actually, you know, sort of fresh white bread. You really get quite a lot of that there, and it is quite thick there. Those are those two things are the staple, the backbone of this beer. So I do like that about this one. But let's focus on the middle third of your palate for the moment and just describe that. So on top of that kind of white bready layer, the bread crust, the white bread, on top of that you can feel the oaty notes there. The oats are actually, I find that the oats are actually quite dense in this one. You can feel them right across that middle third of your palate. It's not like they're just going right down the middle line of your tongue and kind of spreading out a wee bit. You do actually get quite a big bit of an oaty, creamy thickness out of this one. So I really like how that goes together in this beer for sure. But yeah, the way that this goes together on the malty side of things is actually quite nice. The further you go into the aftertaste with this, you actually get a fair wee bit of dryness out of the oats, but it also gives you a little bit of that, you know, creamy smoothness. And the sweetness, actually, the thing with this one is the sweetness that I was picking up isn't quite as prominent as it was, as I was picking it up as being earlier on. So yeah, that's quite an unusual thing about this beer for sure. Yeah, it's quite nice, this one. I actually find the malt base in this beer pretty dense, and that's quite interesting because it's a completely different approach to what I've had from Cromarty before, just mainly because it's the densities coming from the oats rather than the barley malt actually. But I think it works, so thumbs up to Cromarty for this. If they were to take the base of this beer and, you know, play around with other hops and do some things like that, I think they could actually do quite well in this style bracket. I don't know how much they've done that, obviously, because I'm not seeing a lot of their new releases, to be honest. But if they played around with this, they could do some fairly solid New England IPAs. But yeah, on top of the oaty layer, you have got this little circle there, and you get a wee bit of that kind of Werther's original butterscotchy, butter candy sweetness. If you go to the dead centre of your palate, you might get a bit of a straight up caramel there, and that of course is the alcohol of the beer. But as you move further out towards the edge of the palate with this one, you've got a little bit of a kind of McVitie's digestive biscuity sort of thing. So yeah, the way that goes together is really quite nice. So yeah, the middle of your palate in this one is pretty solid. And like I say, if Cromarty were to do a few New England IPAs that weren't sticking to this single hop idea, I think this would be a solid base for them. So play around with that, see how they do. But let's look at the back third of the palate then. I don't think there's too much else to say about the middle third of the palate. So border region between middle third and back third of your palate, you get a wee bit of a bready build up there. You can feel a little bit more kind of bread crusty character. Then into the back third of your palate, you can feel you get a bit of that bread crusty note. It does get a little bit more grainy. You can feel the white bready character does get a little bit more kind of grainy as well. Then on top of that, you can feel the oaty notes just creeping in a little bit, but not too much. On top of all of those three things, you do get the yeasty component of the beer, so you can feel that doughy, yeasty kind of thing coming out of it. So I do like how that goes together in this one. So yeah, the way it goes about its business is on that side is quite nice. It is more like a kind of dense, doughy, bready kind of thing. So that does work actually. It's got a little bit of a kind of, this beer, the further I go into the aftertaste with it as well, it's got a wee bit of a crackery sort of thing going on underneath it. But yeah, when you start at the back of your palate with this beer, you can feel the flavour is a little bit taller. It just condenses down as you come further forward. Then as you go into the middle third of your palate, the flavours are just a little bit more kind of squashed together actually. So again, I like how this beer pieces itself together. So yeah, that's interesting. But on the middle, I think, well, on the hoppy side of things then, I think we've covered the malty and yeasty side of the beer. On the hoppy side of things then, back corners of the palate, there's a nice little bit of an earthy kind of character there. As you move further forward, it's a little bit, it is a little bit kind of herbal. Then as you push towards the kind of front corners of the palate, you get a nice wee bit of a floral aromaticity coming out of this one. So I think it works really quite well from that perspective. So yeah, nice little bit of floral aromaticity, wee touch spicy, then kind of round the front curve of the palate, it is just a little bit lighter and more kind of grassy. There is a wee bit of zestiness comes out of the beer from that perspective too. So yeah. Yeah. So I would say on the grassy side of things, actually it does come across as being like a wet sort of freshly cut grass, but I don't think it's not too zesty. But like I say, I think this beer is maybe about 6 weeks old or something like that, so it's not in its absolute prime condition actually. But yeah, the green component you can feel is still kind of sitting there, but it relies a lot on the late addition hops. But it's still, as I say, a solid beer, this one. So let's focus on that front third of your palate and the fruity side of things then. So the border region of front third and middle third of your palate, again, you get a bit of that bready build up. The base of that front third of your palate is a wee bit more kind of soft and white bready like, so absolutely that kind of lingers there. But on top of that, you get that nice oily bubble where those juicy fruity esters just kind of roll their way out of the beer. So toward the back of that front third of your tongue, you do get a little bit of that more kind of you do get a little bit of that kind of passion fruity note for sure. You do get a wee bit of that, but then as you move further forward, forward from that, you get a little bit of a kind of apricot. You do get a little bit of that dried kind of apricot-y sort of thing. So again, I really like how that goes together in this one. So yeah, big apricot-y notes, not quite as oily as I thought they were going to be from the aroma, but yeah, nice soft dried apricot-y notes in there. But you can also get the kind of dried papaya note, and the thing is, the apricot really pushes quite far forward into the very front half of that front third of your palate in this one as well. So yeah, you're getting a wee bit of an oily pineapple on the front half of that front third of your palate as well, the further you go into the aftertaste. So yeah, this really shows you the soft tropical fruits that Idaho 7 can give you, but you do get a wee bit of an oily orangey character sitting underneath that on the front half of the front third of your palate as well. So I really like that aspect of the beer as well. So yeah, it goes together. It does go together really quite nicely on that side of things as well. So I don't know if there's really anything else we need to say about the fruity side of the beer. A bit of passion fruit, lots of kind of, yeah, a wee bit of mango as well, but lots of big kind of soft dry apricot, a bit of papaya, wee bit of oily pineapple, and a teeny wee bit of orange for me. So yeah, I think that sums it up quite nicely. So I think we can round off this review with a look at the mouthfeel then. Let's do that. So yeah, for me, it's a mid-bodied beer pushing towards the top end. Mid-bodied, the carbonation's quite smooth, and I would say this is one of the slightly more oily New England IPAs I've come across. It does have that element of creaminess underneath though, but it tells you on the can this one is I think, did it say it's it said 40 IBUs, so yeah, I could see that. I would have actually guessed it was a little bit less than that, to be honest with you. I probably would have thought this was a standard 30, so yeah, I don't find it quite as bitter as that, but yeah, there's a fair wee bit of bitterness to it. Malt base, as we say, is really quite smooth, and it's quite a kind of creamy. There is a good bit of creaminess to this. The oats give you a bit of dryness the further you go into the aftertaste, and also a wee bit of sweetness in the middle. They're not quite as kind of porridgey as I was thinking they might be from the aroma. So the beer's held up well in that respect. There's a wee bit of sweetness there in the malt base as well from the barley malts. You know, there's a wee bit of a kind of brown sugary sort of thing, but you've also got quite a nice you also have quite a nice just soft tropical note to this one, but with a wee bit of an oily character as well on the fruity side of things. So yeah, I think we can leave it at that for describing this beer. So yeah, it looks to be pretty solid actually, this one. So yeah, let's leave it there. A nice New England IPA, this one, and as I said, Cromarty Brewing Company, if they were to play around with the base, the malt base they've got with this one, and add different hops and things like that, I think they could be on to a winner with this. So thumbs up to them for that. I'll need to have a look for another one in this single hop series, and we'll see if we get a West Coast or a New England IPA, because I didn't quite expect, I was thinking they would just change the hops in these beers, but obviously they are changing the malt bases with them as well. So yeah, I think they're releasing a new one every month or something like that, which is kind of cool. But yeah, let's leave it there. Once again, thank you for watching my beer reviews. Until the next time, please like, subscribe, share, all the usual YouTube stuff. Let me know your own thoughts on this beer in the comments section below. Let me know what your favourite beers are from Cromarty Brewing Company as well. We will no doubt return to these guys at some point in the fairly near future. But in the meantime, check out my social media, check out theirs, and have a go at some of the beers from Cromarty Brewing Company. Happy Chappy, Rogue Wave, Black Hop Down are all very good. And if you see some in the Hop Showcase series, they're definitely worth checking out too. But until the next time, Slanger just now, I'll catch you guys later. This was the Idaho 7, a 6% New England Hazy IPA, part of the Hop Showcase series from Cromarty Brewing Company on the Black Isle in the Scottish Highlands. Slanger, Skull, see you soon.